Welcome to Dreamtale Sleep Stories. Tonight's reading is the Postbox Network. Settle into your bed or sofa and let your shoulders, jaw, and eyelids grow heavy. Inhale slowly, 1, 2, 3, and sigh the air away, allowing the day to fade into quiet dark. With every soft inhale, you invite fresh English phrases. With every gentle exhale, stray thoughts drift farther off. Behind my voice flows a gentle 528 Hz melody, renowned for guiding the mind toward deep relaxation. Keep your eyes closed or follow the captions, whichever feels right. Simply receive the rhythm and resonance of the language. Deep in rest, tonight's phrases will take root like seeds, ready to bloom into stronger English skills with the morning light. When you feel settled, hold that unhurried breath and allow yourself to drift into the tale. The Postbox Network begins now, and when the story's final line has faded, the music will linger a little longer, carrying you gently deeper into sleep. The Postbox Conspiracy. The morning sun cast long shadows across Threadneedle Street as the financial district of London began to stir with the familiar rhythm of another business day. Among the towering glass buildings and hurried pedestrians, a particularly distinguished red postbox stood at the corner of King William Street, completely unaware that this Tuesday morning would change everything. Reginald P. Box III, though he had never actually chosen this rather pompous name for himself, was about to experience something extraordinary. For 68 years, he had stood in exactly the same spot, collecting letters, weathering storms, and observing the endless parade of human activity. But today, as the first businessman of the morning approached with his usual stack of correspondence, something clicked in what could only be described as Reginald's consciousness. Good heavens, he thought, though of course no one could hear him. I appear to be thinking. The revelation was so startling that if Reginald had been capable of movement, he surely would have jumped. Instead, he remained perfectly still, as postboxes are wont to do, while his newly awakened mind raced with possibilities. I am conscious. I am aware. I am... He paused dramatically in his thoughts. Clearly the most sophisticated piece of postal equipment in the entire British Isles. As the morning progressed, Reginald began to take stock of his situation with the methodical precision he imagined befitted a gentleman of his standing. He was, he decided, obviously the pinnacle of postal engineering. His red paint gleamed more brilliantly than others. His royal cipher was perfectly centered, and his collection slot had the most satisfying metallic clang when letters were posted. Naturally, he mused, I must be the aristocrat of the postal system, perhaps even royalty. It was at this moment that a rather cheerful voice interrupted his self-aggrandizing thoughts. Morning, Fancy Pants. Sleep well? Reginald was so shocked he nearly rattled, which would have been quite undignified. Looking around with his newly discovered ability to perceive his surroundings properly, he spotted the source of this decidedly common greeting. Standing just 20 feet away was another postbox, considerably less pristine than himself, with a slightly dented crown and what appeared to be chewing gum stuck to his side. "I beg your pardon?" Reginald replied in what he hoped was a suitably haughty tone. "Oh, brilliant! You're awake too. Name's Bob. Bob the Box. Been waiting ages for you to join the conversation, mate." Reginald was appalled. This common box was addressing him as an equal. The very notion was preposterous. "I'll have you know," Reginald said stiffly, "that I am Reginald P. Box III, and I am quite clearly of a superior postal lineage." Bob's laughter was hearty and infectious, though Reginald tried very hard not to be infected by it. "Superior postal lineage? Oh, that's rich. We're all made in the same factory, mate. Royal Mail doesn't do posh and common, just functional and slightly less functional." "Nonsense," Reginald huffed. "I am clearly designed for the most important correspondence. Notice my position here in the heart of the financial district. I handle matters of international significance." "Right," Bob said with amusement. "And I handle Mrs. Henderson's grocery lists and little Timmy's letters to Father Christmas. Equally crucial to the functioning of society, I'd say." Reginald chose to ignore this obvious peasantry and instead focused on what he considered his true calling. As the day progressed and various people approached to post their letters, he began to study each one with the intensity of what he imagined was a great detective. "Observe, Bob," he announced as a nervous-looking man in a gray suit approached. "Note the furtive glances, the way he clutches that envelope as if it contains state secrets." The man posted his letter quickly and hurried away. "Mark my words," Reginald declared. "That envelope contains sensitive information, possibly industrial espionage, perhaps even international intrigue." Bob watched the same man walk into the coffee shop across the street, where he joined a woman for what was clearly a coffee date. Or, Bob suggested gently, it might just be a love letter. "Love letter?" Reginald scoffed. "My dear Bob, you clearly lack the sophisticated analytical skills necessary for proper deduction. I have obviously been chosen for this location precisely because of my superior observational capabilities." Over the following days, Reginald threw himself into what he considered his detective work with tremendous enthusiasm. Every letter posted became a clue in some grand mystery. Every person who approached was potentially a spy, criminal, or person of international importance. The nervous man in the gray suit, whom Reginald had dubbed Agent Envelope, became a particular source of fascination. He appeared every day at precisely 11:47 a.m., posted a single letter, and departed quickly. Reginald was convinced this was obviously a dead drop for sensitive intelligence. "Bob," he would whisper excitedly each day, "Agent Envelope approaches. Observe his technique." Bob, who had quickly grown fond of his pompous neighbor despite himself, played along good-naturedly. "Very suspicious indeed, Reggie. That's definitely spy behavior, that is." Reginald, the distinguished postbox, corrected. "And yes, I'm building quite a comprehensive file on his activities." What Reginald didn't know, but Bob had figured out on the first day, was that Agent Envelope was actually named Derek, worked in the accounting firm across the street, and was desperately in love with his colleague Sarah, from the marketing department. Derek's daily letters were increasingly romantic declarations that he was far too shy to deliver in person. Bob had reached this conclusion by the simple method of watching Derek's face, observing his route to and from the building, and noting the dreamy expression he wore after posting each letter. It wasn't exactly rocket science, but Bob decided that letting Reginald have his detective fantasy was more fun than spoiling it. The situation became even more entertaining when Reginald decided to expand his operations. "Bob," he announced one morning, "I have decided to establish a network of postal intelligence operatives." "Have you now?" Bob replied, trying not to laugh. "Indeed, there are several other postboxes in the area, and I intend to coordinate a comprehensive surveillance operation." And so began what Reginald grandly termed the Postal Intelligence Network, though Bob privately thought of it as Reggie's ridiculous detective club. The first recruit was Professor Pemberton, the postbox stationed outside the British Library. Professor, as he preferred to be called, had developed something of an intellectual complex due to his proximity to all those books. "Ah, Reginald," Professor said when contacted through the mysterious postal communication system they seemed to share. "I have indeed observed several suspicious literary transactions. Yesterday, a woman checked out 3 books on cryptography. Clearly, she's either a codebreaker or a spy learning tradecraft." "Excellent work, Professor," Reginald replied enthusiastically. "Continue monitoring the situation." Bob shook his head in amusement. The woman Professor was talking about was obviously a mystery writer doing research, but he decided not to mention this. Next was Mary, a cheerful postbox stationed in Greenwich Park, who had appointed herself the mother figure of the network. "Oh, loves," Mary chimed in, "I've got ever so many suspicious characters here. There's this group that meets every morning and does synchronized movements. Very secretive they are." "Fascinating," Reginald exclaimed. "Clearly a paramilitary training operation." Bob, who could see the park from his position, knew perfectly well that Mary was describing a Tai Chi class for seniors. But again, he kept this observation to himself. The final member of the network was Rush, a perpetually stressed postbox outside Waterloo Station. "Can't talk long," Rush said rapidly when recruited. "Too busy, too many letters, too many people. But yes, suspicious activity everywhere. People running, people with large bags, people checking watches. Definitely something big going down." "Excellent," Reginald declared. "We have assembled a formidable intelligence operation." Bob marveled at his friend's ability to turn the perfectly normal activities of London life into an elaborate spy thriller. But he had to admit, there was something endearing about Reginald's enthusiasm. The network's investigations continued for several weeks, with each member reporting increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories. Professor was convinced that the library was the center of an international academic espionage ring. Mary was certain that the park was being used for secret government fitness experiments. Rush was convinced that the train station was obviously the hub of all suspicious activity in London, which Bob reflected might actually be true in a way. Meanwhile, Reginald continued his intense observation of Agent Envelope, building what he considered an airtight case for international espionage. "Notice, Bob," he said one morning, "how he varies his arrival time by up to 3 minutes each day. Classic counter-surveillance technique." Bob, who had noticed that Derek's arrival time depended entirely on how long the queue was at the coffee shop, nodded sagely. "And observe how he never makes eye contact with other pedestrians. Obviously trained in operational security." Bob observed that Derek was usually staring at his feet because he was nervous about the increasingly romantic letters he was posting. But he made an encouraging noise instead of explaining this. The situation reached a crescendo when Reginald announced that he had detected what he believed to be a pattern in Agent Envelope's activities. "Bob, I believe I have cracked the code. Agent Envelope's letters are getting longer each week. He's clearly building up to something significant. My analysis suggests that a major operation is imminent." Bob, who had watched Derek's confidence grow as he wrote increasingly bold love letters, thought that something was indeed imminent, but probably not what Reginald was expecting. And then one morning, everything changed. A sleek black car pulled up near Reginald's corner, and 2 people in expensive suits emerged. They wore dark sunglasses despite the overcast London sky, carried briefcases, and spoke in hushed tones while gesturing toward various buildings in the area. "Bob!" Reginald practically vibrated with excitement. "This is it. Real government agents. I told you this area was under surveillance." For once, Bob had to admit that the newcomers did look rather official and mysterious. They certainly weren't the usual local residents or office workers. The 2 agents spent the morning making notes, taking photographs, and having intense conversations. Reginald was beside himself with vindication. "I must alert the network immediately," he declared. "All our intelligence gathering has led to this moment." But as the day progressed, Bob began to pick up fragments of conversation from the mysterious agents, and what he heard made his metaphorical heart sink. Outdated infrastructure, untapped digital efficiency, untapped digital efficiency, removal scheduled for next month, untapped modernization project. The truth hit Bob like a falling brick. These weren't spies or government agents conducting surveillance. They were city planners and efficiency experts conducting an audit of postal services. And from what he could gather, the results of their audit were not going to be good news for traditional postboxes. Bob faced a terrible dilemma. Should he tell Reginald the truth and shatter his friend's elaborate detective fantasy? Or should he let him enjoy his moment of triumph, even though it might be short-lived? The decision was made for him when the agents approached Reginald directly. "This unit shows signs of age," one of them said, making notes on a tablet. "Functionality appears adequate, but it's not cost-effective compared to digital alternatives. The location could accommodate a more modern solution." The other agreed. "Something more in line with current communication trends." Reginald, of course, interpreted this entirely differently. "Bob," he whispered excitedly, "they're discussing my strategic importance. They recognize my value as an intelligence asset. But Bob could see the writing on the wall, literally, as one of the agents placed a small mark on Reginald's side, the kind of mark that usually indicated something was scheduled for removal. That evening, after the agents had departed and the street had grown quiet, Bob made a difficult decision. "Reggie, mate," he said gently, "we need to talk. Of course, I'm sure you want to hear all about my interactions with the government agents." "Actually," Bob said carefully, "I don't think they were government agents. I think they were city planners, and I think we might be in trouble." Bob explained what he had overheard about modernization and digital alternatives and removal schedules. He watched as the reality slowly dawned on Reginald. "You mean they want to replace us?" "I'm afraid so, mate." Reginald was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller than Bob had ever heard it. "But what about my detective work? What about the network? What about Agent Envelope?" Bob's heart ached for his friend. "I've got something to tell you about Agent Envelope too." And so, as gently as he could, Bob explained about Derek and Sarah, about love letters rather than spy communications, about the simple human story that had been unfolding right in front of them. "So I was wrong about everything?" Reginald asked quietly. "Not everything," Bob said firmly. "You were right about caring. You were right about paying attention. You just saw it through a different lens." "A ridiculous lens," Reginald said miserably. "An entertaining lens," Bob corrected. "Do you know how much more interesting you made everything? Do you know how much fun the network has had with your investigations? They were humoring me. They were enjoying themselves. There's a difference." The next morning brought even worse news. Official notices were posted announcing the London Postal Modernization Initiative. Traditional post boxes in several locations, including Reginald's Corner, were to be replaced with smart postal solutions within the month. Reginald's entire network was devastated by the news. Professor Pemberton was practically philosophical about it. All civilizations must adapt or perish. But Mary was distraught. "Who's going to take care of all my people?" And Rush was characteristically frantic. "No time to process this. No time, no time." "Well," Reginald said with forced dignity, "I suppose that's the end of the Postal Intelligence Network." "Not necessarily," Bob said thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time to use your detective skills for something real. Such as figuring out how to make people realize how much they need us." And so began what Bob privately thought of as the Great Postbox Rescue Mission, though Reginald insisted on calling it Operation Postal Preservation. The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Each member of the network would use their observations and insights to demonstrate their irreplaceable value to their communities. Professor Pemberton would document the irreplaceable role of physical letters in academic correspondence. Mary would highlight how the park postbox served as a crucial meeting point and landmark for families and community groups. Rush would emphasize the importance of reliable postal services for travelers and commuters. And Reginald would finally put his observational skills to proper use by documenting the real human stories that unfolded around his corner every day. But I don't know how to observe real human stories, Reginald confessed. I only know how to look for spy conspiracies. Then let me teach you, Bob offered. And so, for the first time, Bob shared his perspective on the daily drama of human life. He showed Reginald how to see the office worker who posted birthday cards to his elderly mother every month, rain or shine. He pointed out the small business owner who used their postal service to maintain personal relationships with clients. He helped Reginald notice the young couple who posted handwritten letters to each other, even though they worked in the same building, just because they thought it was romantic. It's not less interesting than spy stories, Bob explained. It's just different. Love, friendship, family, hope. These are the real conspiracies that keep the world working. Reginald began to see his corner with new eyes. Agent Envelope, Derek, became not a mysterious operative, but a sweet, nervous young man trying to work up the courage to express his feelings. The busy executives became people with families and worries and dreams. The tourists became adventurers, writing postcards to share their discoveries with loved ones back home. I think, Reginald said one morning, I understand now what you meant about seeing with the heart instead of just the eyes. You're getting it, mate. The network members threw themselves into their preservation mission with the same enthusiasm they had once applied to conspiracy theories. Letters began appearing in local newspapers. Community groups started petitions. Local historians spoke about the cultural significance of traditional postboxes. But the real breakthrough came when Derek, completely unaware that he had been the subject of intense surveillance, finally worked up the courage to deliver one of his letters in person. Reginald and Bob watched as Derek approached Sarah's desk, letter in hand, and nervously asked if she would like to have coffee with him. Been writing you letters, Derek confessed, but I've been too nervous to give them to you directly. I've been posting them to myself and pretending they were from you, just so I could read something romantic. Sarah's face lit up with delight. You're the one who's been making me feel like someone was thinking of me every day. You've been getting letters? Every day for months. I never knew who was sending them, but they've been the best part of my day. It turned out that Derek had been addressing his letters incorrectly, and through a series of postal coincidences, they had been delivered to Sarah anyway. The postal system, in its mysterious way, had been helping true love along. Bob, Reginald whispered, I think we just witnessed something more exciting than any spy story. Now you're getting it. The Derek and Sarah story became the centerpiece of the campaign to save the postboxes. Here was proof that traditional postal services still played a vital role in human connection, even in the digital age. The story was picked up by local media, then national news, and finally became a symbol of the importance of preserving traditional communication methods. The campaign worked. The modernization plan was modified to preserve historically significant and community-important postboxes. Reginald's Corner, now famous as the location where Derek and Sarah's romance had flourished, was designated as a cultural landmark. "So," Bob asked as they settled into their new status as protected monuments, "what's next for the great detective Reginald P. Box III?" "I think," Reginald said thoughtfully, "I'd like to try solving some real mysteries for a change. Such as why Mrs. Henderson always posts her grocery lists, or what little Timmy really wants Father Christmas to bring him, or how we can help more people like Derek find the courage to share their feelings." Bob smiled, which is quite an achievement for a postbox. "I think you're going to be a much better detective, focusing on the real mysteries of human nature." And Bob? "Yes, mate. Thank you for teaching me that the most interesting conspiracies are the ones that bring people together instead of pulling them apart." From that day forward, Reginald continued his observations, but with a new perspective. He learned to see the real stories unfolding around him. The elderly man who posted letters to his late wife on their anniversary, the small girl who wrote to her deployed father, the immigrants who maintained connections with families half a world away. The Postal Intelligence Network evolved too, becoming less about imaginary espionage and more about real community support. They started identifying people who might need extra help or attention, and finding subtle ways to alert the appropriate community resources. Professor Pemberton used his literary connections to help aspiring writers find pen pals and critique partners. Mary became an unofficial coordinator for park events and community gatherings. Rush developed an uncanny ability to help lost travelers and connect stranded commuters with assistance. And Reginald? Reginald became exactly what he had always claimed to be, a distinguished gentleman of the Postal Service, observing and protecting his corner of London with wisdom, dignity, and just a touch of his old theatrical flair. "You know, Bob," he said one morning, as Derek and Sarah, now happily engaged, stopped by to post wedding invitations, "I think I prefer reality to fiction after all." "Took you long enough to figure that out?" "Yes, well, some of us are slower learners than others, but we get there eventually. That we do, mate. That we do." And in the heart of London's financial district, two postboxes continued their eternal vigil, no longer looking for imaginary conspiracies, but helping to weave the very real and much more wonderful conspiracy of human connection that makes any city truly alive. The greatest mystery, they had learned, wasn't hidden in secret codes or clandestine meetings. It was hidden in plain sight, in the everyday magic of people reaching out to touch each other's lives, one letter at a time. you